I'd like to this morning continue our series that we started last week, Sunday, which will go on for the next 4 weeks, including this week, another 3. And it's basically dealing with the idea of my story and built on the thesis that every one of us are busy writing our story. Now, I want to speak about something that happened this last couple of weeks. Paul Dereck had to bury his dad yesterday. Stephanie and Jeff and the family had to be there. The Friedman family had to be there when her dad was at the memorial. And inside of these memorials that I've attended, one always hears the story of people's lives. One always hears about what they've done, the kind of life that they've lived, the example that they were to the children and the grandchildren. And all of these stories are wonderful to listen to. In fact, sometimes we find that I've had an assumption about somebody and I think, wow, I've never known that of that person. And so in each person's life, there's a sliver of tremendous insight that comes when one listens at a memorial. But basically this morning I want to speak to you about this new year that we have entered into. I want you to ask the question once again that when you're going to be sitting with your friend or your family and say, I want to tell you this story quickly. Just listen to this. This is what happened to me last week. How will that story end? How will that story be communicated? What will the content of that story be? In other words, I want you to think about the story of your life. That one day when people speak about you, what will they say? But I want you to think about something different. Every one of us has a story. But I need you to understand that sometimes the story that we tell is what people can know about what is on the surface. And then there's another story that is simultaneously being written, and it's written in the book of life. A story of your life in terms of the subsurface things, the intent of the heart things, where you might be able to understand, or only God sees that part of your life. Every one of us has a story. And sometimes there are parts of this story where we want to rip out a page and say, I wish that never ever happened. It is so painful. The memories are just absolutely bizarre. I really wish I've never done that. Some of us need to rip out chapters out of our book. But each one of us are busy writing our book and writing our life. One of the key aspects of last week's lesson was that the decision we make today will basically be the story that will be remembered in the future. In other words, one decision you make today will influence the outcome tomorrow. The key point of last week's lesson was the story of King David, that he made a decision which had an absolutely disastrous result. Now, 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1 says, it happened in the spring of the year at the time when kings go into battle. By the way, one day this happened. These are the events that occurred. And David decided, I'm not going to go to battle. I'll stay at home and I'll send somebody else to fight for me. I'll stay home and I'll rest and I'll relax. And basically this very poor decision led to a world of sin and complexity. It led him into adultery, eventually murder of his best friend, and basically the consequences we read about in vivid detail in the scriptures. And that's what makes the scriptures such an incredible book to read, because it doesn't hide the warts of people's lives, so that we can read it and say, oh, goodness, that's not going to be good. It never ends well. A preacher made a comment one day, and the topic of this comment was, he says, principles of the path. In other words, when you want to be with Jesus one day, one asks the question, what are the principles that I must follow? And he makes this comment, which I found very insightful. He says, direction, not intention, determines destination. Wow, I like that. Because I remember as a child, I was in standard 4, and I had a teacher there that said to me, he asked us a question. We had to read one book per week at the library when I was a child in standard 4. I'm not sure, grade 6, I think it is. And I couldn't make it. I didn't read the book. And he said to me, why didn't you read the book? And I said, well, because of this and that and the other. And you had to write like a 1-page summary of the book. And I said, well, I couldn't get to it. But I really will get to it. And he says, I'll never forget this comment. It shifted the way that I think. He says that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so often we intend. But this guy said, no, there's something far deeper. He talks about direction. In other words, what we actually do in how we're going to get there. The other day, Victoria and Ruan took us to a place called Panama Beach. I had no clue of where this place is. All I knew, it was somewhere in Florida. All I knew is we had to get into the car and just drive. But a long story square was that there had to be a specific direction pointed out by the global positioning system as to how we were going to get there. I didn't know the road, but I do know the way to Cork Bay. Let's take an example. Sue and I would love to ride to Cork Bay and Simonstown or to Hart Bay or whatever the case is, and we're driving and we say we'd just like to get to the sea, just to walk a bit on the beach, walk on the harbor wall, and just look around and enjoy the sunshine and all this kind of stuff. But suddenly, I'm finding myself on the R27 all the way on my way to Langebaan, passing Melkbosstrand. Suddenly, the question will be asked is, hey, where are you going? Where are you going? Wrong direction, pal. Okay, I get it. In the same way, we might ask the question and use that analogy regarding your and my spiritual life. Maybe we need to ask the question this morning, what is the one thing that you desire that you would love to achieve this year? Maybe what you're saying is that I desire to have an incredibly deep understanding of the Word of God this year. I would like to deepen my knowledge of what God has to say to me. And then you embark on this journey. Let's say that's the one thing that you chose today or this year, and you say, well, I'm going to do it. Next best thing, the day comes past, and the day goes, the day arrives, and the day passes by, and you ask the question, have I done it? Ooh, haven't done it yet. You know what? My day has been so busy. I was just so tired. I had to pick up the kids. I had to make dinner. I had to put the kids to bed. And eventually about 10 o'clock tonight, I was just so exhausted. I thought, I'm going to go to bed. I'll watch a bit of television. And then, before you know it, nothing happened. And so week after week goes by. Wednesday evening comes and goes. You don't attend Bible study. You don't even come online because I am too tired. And suddenly the excuses comes flooding in with what you wanted to do, what you intended to do, but never actually did it. And those kind of things are very dangerous. Let me ask you another suggestion. What about saying I want to have a very strong marriage and an incredibly good connection with my wife? Now that's great, but it's not going to happen if you stay late at work every day, you go out with your mates to watch rugby every Saturday, play golf. It starts at 6 o'clock in the morning and finishes off at 9 o'clock at night. It's not going to happen. In other words, you need to take times out with her, spend time, or rather not spend time with her, but invest time in her and bulk time with her so that you can find out how this woman clicks. What makes her happy? What really and truly blows the stack off? What curls her hair? What causes it to go straight? The kind of thing that you want to know, what makes this girl buzz? If I do this, she's so happy. It's spending time together. And again, the idea is direction, not intention, determines destination. You see, sometimes you are halfway telling your story and then you start to ask the question, hang on a minute, how did I get here? Let me go back quickly. Many years ago, I was sitting specifically with somebody talking about a decision that they had made, and how things in their lives have gone wrong. And I asked them the question, didn't you see this coming? No, I didn't. It just kind of sneaked up on me. And I'm not trying to decry the fact that sometimes things do happen that are surprising. Circumstances change beyond your imagination. But the obvious thing is asking the question, am I focused on a direction in my life that would get me to the destination that I want to be at? I want to speak about a few things that might be not controversial, but makes you and I think. Let's say one of your objectives is, I want to raise godly children. I want to raise children that understands and knows the Lord. You know what, brethren, let's have an open discussion as parents. Keeping them home on a Sunday morning and not bringing them to Sunday school, and building on that narrative that the Bible was written in for them to relate to the story of Jesus, the story of Moses, the wonderful unfolding of God's love within humanity and how that intertwines with his will and how he directs the lives of people, how he establishes relationship, how they walk away from him and the consequences of that. We're robbing our children of the very essence of the building blocks that makes that possible. Maybe sometime you think to yourself, well, youth class is not important. I will sleep in. I've had a busy week. You really want to know what I want to tell you? You're irresponsible. By God's grace, I pray that you don't see what that irresponsibility will reap in your life of your child. I know families that regardless of how they feel, regardless of how sick they feel, they're at worship and at Bible study. And I honor that. But there are some of us, brethren, that for the slightest reason, we will really just put God on the back burner. I want to say this to you this morning as somebody who loves you. That be very careful of how you direct your life with God. You need to be focused entirely on what he has to say. You see, sometimes, brethren, we have this idea of building a life of regret. Building a life of regret where we say, if only I did this, that would not have happened. If only I made that decision, that would not have come my way. I beg of you today that you rethink your life. Because trust me, the decisions you make today will unfold in the story that is told about you and that you will tell your children. Maybe you'll tell your children one day, you know what, I need to look you squarely in the eye and tell you, I, as your mother or your father, have been irresponsible with raising you. On a Sunday morning when I should have had you at Sunday school, I chose to sleep in. When I should have been here and gone made sure that you get to bed at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, me sitting with my mates, drinking beer, having a braai, having this child run around the house till 11, 12 o'clock at night, not getting the rest that they need and getting them to Sunday school the next day. We will not dare do that when it comes to the child's school week. Oh, no, the child must be in school. And the holy and thou attitude, but the neglect of the child's spiritual well-being is evident. And you will live to tell and see that story unfold in the life of your child if you're not careful. So you need to buck up. Change your attitude and make sure that you get direction and determine the destination where that child's going to be. I'm going to tell you a story. I lost a son. Okay? Let me tell you, that woman sitting there was the woman that every Sunday morning she'd make sure that those kids are woken up. Eventually, we didn't have to wake them up anymore. Do you know what, brethren? We very rarely cry about him. You know why? Because we know where he is. Why? Because we wanted him in that destination. And so everything along the lines would happen. He was managing a company, and I'll never forget the day I was sitting there. And I spoke to him that morning. He said, Dad, we're opening up a new shop in Claremont. I said to him, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'll see you at worship tomorrow. That morning, at 5 to 10, my boy walked in and he came to sit down here. He smiled at me. He knows where he must be. That's why the day my son closed his eyes for the final time, I knew I'd see him later. Don't let God take your child away. Don't let God take you that is enabling your child to be rebellious toward God and think that me as a parent's going to sit here and say that that's okay. It's not okay. You see, brethren, at the end of the day, wil jy groot krokodil trane huil. That child, the beautiful child, Kulsum, was baptized into Christ here. I baptized her myself. Of course you're crying if you miss the child. But we don't have to worry where that child is. Am I right, sissies? Why? Because we've had the investment in the life of that child. Paul would tell us, how do you live out a story that is worth telling? He answers it and he says, therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Hebrews 12:1. And then he says, I want you to look. What is the direction? What is the focus? He says, let's look unto Jesus. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And there again, that narrative of writing our story becomes real because we're letting Jesus himself author it. The one that is writing our story in his blood. Wonderful to have him on the front end. And so in this series, we're making 4 decisions. If you weren't here last week, I'm going to encourage you with the first decision. This is the clear question. What is there, the one thing that you want to change this year? That you want to focus on? In this lesson, we're going to talk about what is it that you're going to stop. What are you going to stop doing? Some behaviors, mindset, attitudes that hinders you from living out the story of God. The third week, we're going to look about what you are going to do and where you are going to stay. You see, sometimes we look at that story where we give up on our dream. We give up on friendships, we give up on God, we give up on the church, we give up on marriage, we give up on everybody, we give up on family. Although it is hard, what are you going to decide to stay? And that's next week's lesson. Week 4, we're going to then decide where we are going to go. In other words, we're going to ask the question, this year, where does God want me to be? That's going to require a phenomenal amount of faith. More marching into the unknown where Jesus Christ is the only one that leads me. Into unfamiliar territory to live a life that is different to what I'm living now. A life that is not based on what I see, but in fact on what he guides me. A life that is based on faith and not by sight. For today, we're going to decide to stop. The Old Testament about Moses that many of us can relate to. Many of us are single parents, and you're amazing parents. You have a demanding job, you struggle to get things done, you struggle to keep children on the road, to stay focused on God. And then you come home and you still got to sit down and study because you're trying to improve your academic qualification. You feel overwhelmed. Moses felt the same frustration as he was worn out by people. But Moses' father-in-law came to him and says, you're going to have to stop all of this. Exodus 18 verse 17. You see, he says to him, the thing that you're doing is not good. It's exactly what I said before. The thing that you're doing is not good. And I'm not going to say it's good. It's not good for you. It's not good for that child. That child's been entrusted to us. You see, maybe today one of the things that's not good is not just not bringing your child to Sunday school and training the child up to be God. They find to be the most incredible academics and wonderful students at school, and they can find a nice job and drive a nice car, but an absolute failure when it comes to their relationship to God. Maybe today you've got an addiction. Maybe you've got a bit of a holding or an attitude. Maybe there's a thought process that sabotages your ability to keep your eyes on Jesus Christ. You see, at the end of the day, when you look at these things, Jethro tells Moses, he says to him, both of these people who are with you will surely wear you out. You both, you and the people, because you are trying to focus on one thing all the time. You're just doing your job and you're running around like a chicken without its head on. And then he says to him, I want you to listen to my voice. I'm going to give you counsel and God will be with you. Okay, Moses, here's the game plan. I want you to look at just exactly what we spoke about Sunday school. Here's the game plan. Okay? Here's the game plan. He says to him, you as a parent are trying to raise your child to be godly. You focus on homework, you focus on the child's extramural activities, and as you're working with this child here, you come home, you're so tired, the last thing you list for is to work. But you know what God does? He's so clever, an absolute genius. He calls into existence Sunday school teachers and youth and young adult class teachers that says, I'll stick up my hand and I will work, I'll stand in the gap. And God says, right, great. And then he says, so it will be easier for you as a parent, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing and God so commands you, then you'll be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace. Come on, that's the game plan. Don't get it? God says you don't have to do this alone. You need to just see what God has placed in front of you. You've got to stop trying to do things yourself. And you must start trusting people who can work with you. You see, what is the story we are going to tell our children one day? You see, one of the key things is when I'm focusing on my family or to grow spiritually or make sure that my financial situation is under control and well, and my stewardship is well within the parameters that God had set, taking care of my body, being involved with the life of my children, you see, making a difference in the community, all those kind of things and aspects are drilled into the fabric of this congregation. There was a call this morning for it. Some of us said, ain't got no time for that. Some people says, I'm in. You see, the story that we're going to, the decisions we make today will tell the right story next week or next year or when people read out your obituary. Ephesians 4 verse 17 that Andre read. He said, do not continue living like those who do not believe. You were taught to leave the old self. Stop living the evil way you lived before. And you were taught to be made new in your hearts, to become new people. That new person is made to be like God, made to be truly good and holy. So you must stop telling lies. Tell each other the truth, because we all belong to each other in the same body. When you are angry, do not sin. And be sure to stop being angry before the end of the day. Those who are stealing must stop stealing and start working. Those should earn an honest living for themselves. Then you will have something to share with those who are poor. When you talk, do not say harmful things, but say what people need. Words that will help others become stronger. Then what you say will do good to those who listen to you. Do not be bitter or angry or mad. Never shout angrily or say things to hurt others. Never do anything evil. Be kind and loving to each other and forgive each other, just as God forgave you in Christ. The question on the table this morning, what is there that you and I need to stop? What is it? Give it a name, give the habit an absolute identification and say, that's what has got to go. What do I need to adjust here today? that's going to change the trajectory of my life in the future. Paul lists it. He says, stop lying. Stop being deceitful. Stop stealing. Stop being horrible to people. Stop gossiping. Stop shouting. Stop being angry. Stop swearing. Stop using God's name in vain. Stop abusing alcohol and hurting your body. Maybe today you must stop worrying. Or maybe you must stop having sex without being married. Maybe that is something that you have to stop doing. Maybe you need to stop some things that makes it difficult for you to continue having sex outside of your marriage. Maybe you should stop spending so much money on what you really, and spend money on what you really need. Maybe you need to stop smoking and stop overeating. Maybe you need to choose your crowd much better. That's taking you down, and making swearing and talking in foul language normal. Maybe you need to change the company you keep. Maybe you should stop treating your wife or children the way you have been treating them. Maybe you need to stop trying to control everybody and everything. Maybe you need to stop being critical and judgmental of everything. Maybe you need to stop and let go of the hurt and holding the grudge that is absolutely crippling you. Maybe you need to let go of the cell phone or Facebook. Maybe you need to stop sleeping through sermons. You see, whatever that list is, you need to look at it and say, this is the one thing I want to change. Hebrews 12, 1-2, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. The Hebrew writer lists two things. First of all, he says, lay aside the weight. I'm not quite sure if you've ever run a 100-meter weight. The first thing you do when you do pre-season training, in preparation for the race and for training, you lose weight. Because that's the first thing you need to do. Because the lighter you are, the less you need to carry while you're trying to get to the line. I want you to imagine running a 100-meter race with 25 extra kilograms of weight all the time. You see, sometimes the Hebrew writer is implying that it could be perfectly innocent and harmless. But he said, get rid of those things that are distracting you. Get rid of stuff that's going to mess with your mind or divide your attention. If you're a student today and you want to be a medical doctor like Hannah is aspiring to do, there are things when she says yes to being a medical doctor, she says no to everything else that stands in her way. If you want to be a brilliant theologian, I'm just using that as an analogy in my world, you need to say no to certain things and yes to God to make sure that that specific goal is met. It must go. Mark Phillips wrote a wonderful piece. He ran a few years ago in the Indianapolis mini marathon, and he wrote these words after it. And I think Connie can relate to it very, very well. He says one of the surest way to tell who's really serious about the race is to look at how much they are carrying. He said, I saw people with amazing amounts of stuff, car keys, wallets, snacks, stereos, and more, all crammed into a fanny pack or strapped around their waist. Even though there is water every 2 miles, I even saw people carrying water bottles with drinking tubes bouncing down against their legs. I was amazed that if anyone could carry anything extra for 13 miles. And then he remarks, he says, I also saw the opposite extreme. Before the race started, I walked past a racer and he was wearing shoes, shorts, and his number tag. That's it. No shirt, no stereo, no snack bag full of chips, just the bare minimum it took to run to be decent. Not surprisingly, his number tag was blue, which meant he'll be starting in the front of the pack with the other serious competitors. It was obvious that he had no interest in being dragged down by a bunch of junk. His purpose was to run, period. In the same way, Paul tells us to toss the stuff that's holding you back. Toss the stuff. Get rid of it. If you're involved in a relationship that is forcing your relationship into, or a gap between you and God, change it. Walk away. If you're in a relationship that is causing you to sin, stop it. Immediately. Ask the question, is this going to get me where God wants me to be? Yes or no? And based on that decision, make the decision. Ultimately, here's the key. Every one of us has been given a supreme life, and you are the author of your own life. Nobody's going to check my life and say, he lived a great life. No, only you and God. You see, here's the key. We're not just talking about moderating behavior, but the key behind it all is what I do today will decide where I will end up tomorrow or the next year. You see, sometimes we say, Dereck, I hear what you're saying. Oh man, I've tried that. I've had these annual revisits of my goals and stuff. No, this is not it. We spoke from the way it would go. We're not talking about 5, 6, 7, or 8 things that you must achieve. That you can write in your desk pad every morning, which I do. Or write it on your phone and work through the list. This is just one thing that is fundamental to your life. Name it. Say no to the stuff that stands in your path. Next week we're going to talk about the things that you wanted to give up and maybe should not have. And we'll think that through as we walk together. But here's what I want to speak to you about this morning in conclusion, is that you don't have to do this alone. I really love the Lord's Supper of Darren this morning. He said, you know what? You don't have to be a 6. You can be a 7. The number 7 is an incredible number because it consists of 2 numbers that are put together. The number 3 is the number for divinity. Number 4 is the number of humanity. And so God says, I want to do this with you. I want you to live a life that if we look together at your life as it goes through this year and at the end of this year, I want for you and I to look back and say, wow, we've come a long way. The stuff that I've ditched, it was not even worth holding on to. What is it? Identify it. What must be stopped and let it go. It's not good for you. But I want to touch on something else just in conclusion. Don't do this alone. Today you may need to confess your sin. You may need to repent. You may need to be baptized into Christ so that you can be raised by the power of God to live a new life. If that's what you need to do, then do it. If you need to repent, stop sinning, then do it. It'll be much better for you. I've tried it. Some things I needed to look at. My wife knows about it. And I said, this year, that's gone. Not going to happen. And by God's grace, I know temptations are going to come. I know distractions are going to come. I know these things are going to come. But between us, we're going to make the one thing that we've decided to happen. Why? Because God said, we live for the audience of one. And so I encourage you today as we stand and sing our final song, make that decision and walk that line with Him who has everything in His heart to make sure that you can be all and more than you need to be. Let's stand and sing our song of encouragement this morning.